Parveen Kumar from New Delhi, our chairman, Sri Ranjit Warrior, all MC members and senior members and friends in our profession. So today we have a very important subject, series of practical issues while auditing under Ind AS. We have Sri Parveen Kumar from New Delhi joining us for this technical session. May I request our chairman, Sri Ranjit Warrior, to welcome our chief guest and our resource person and the participants.
Thank you, sir. Most respected and eminent faculty for the evening, CA Parveen Kumarji from Delhi, my respected MC colleagues, participants, very good evening to all of you. As we all know, for the evening, the topic that we are going to deliberate upon is going to be on the practical issues faced by our auditors, by our members, when it comes to putting Ind AS in place or implementing Ind AS in place for our audits, for our audit practice. As all of us know, Accounting Standards Board, ASB, has been putting in a lot of effort per se to spread the good word, to spread a lot of awareness, especially when it comes to topics such as Ind AS and IFRS. And thus is a result that we also thought could be a good time per se before we start into our audit season. A good time for all of us to refresh upon, all of us to have clarity on the implementation and the exercise of Ind AS in our audits wherever pertaining and applicable. And hence, with a discussion that I had with CA Srivatsa Gopal, that he was truly instrumental in identifying the apt resource that we have here with us today. CA Parveen Kumar sir has got immense experience, I should say. He's been a guru in IFRS, Ind AS, US GAAP, with 3 decades of experience that he carries in his practice. Very apt personality, very apt faculty that we have been blessed with to have with us this evening to address on this very relevant and important topic. At the outset, let me wholeheartedly welcome Parveen Kumarji for accepting our invitation and joining us live for the session today. Thank you, sir. I have my MC colleagues with me, Vice Chairman of the branch, CA KV Joe sir, immediate past Chairman of Ernakulam branch, CA Roy Varghese sir, SICASA Students Association Chairman, CA Salim, and other managing committee colleagues. Very good afternoon, very good evening, and welcoming you all to the session as well today. We have though around 150 registrations. The crowd seems a little too thin for the moment to start off with, but we hope to have them join the session very soon. Happy to welcome each one of you all to this session today. Also, that we have some very interesting topics, to be frank, planned for the month. We've got a topic on UAE VAT for tomorrow in the morning. And we've got a chain series of webinars happening on internal audit, SME and startup standards on auditing. We've got at least 28 hours of CP planned for the month. Hoping to see you all probably on an average of daily basis on the WebEx platform for each topic or the other. Welcoming each one of you all to the topic today. Thanks to each one of you. Let's have a good evening of learning today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman, Sri Ranjit Warrior. Now I'm very happy and privileged to introduce our speaker for this afternoon. CA Parveen Kumar is the National Head for Assurance Service, an expert in IFRS, Ind AS, and international GAAP. He has over 28 years of experience in accounting, advisory, audits, and has designed systems for cost efficiency and timely delivery. Through risk management, risk assessment studies, forensic audits, and internal controls reviews, he has helped a large number of national and international corporates. Parveen qualified as a CA and ISA from our institute and holds an IFRS certification from ACCA UK. He has been a member of the National Advisory Committee on Accounting Standards, Accounting Standard Board, Expert Advisory Committee, Auditing and Assurance Standards Board, and various research groups of ICAI, as well as WTO and the International Affairs Committee of ICWAI. He chairs subgroups of economic affairs and taxation committees of national trade chambers. As a faculty, he has provided support to ICAI and various management institutes, universities, and public sector undertakings. In addition to speaking on specific topics on national TV, live webcast, and other platforms, Parveen has also presented papers in neighboring countries like Dubai, Nepal, Myanmar, Singapore, etc. A regular contributor to leading industry journals and magazines. His book, Consolidation Under Ind AS IFRS Converged Standards, was published by Wolf, Wolters Clover, CCH. Being a passionate long-distance runner, CA Parveen has successfully completed marathon in Boston, Singapore, Tokyo, Delhi, Mumbai, and Gurgaon. So these words I invite our speaker for this afternoon, CA Parveen Kumar. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you for highlighting that marathon part because this is very close to heart. And generally speaking, our CA fraternity, the people are, more glued to the books and the accounts. So I was talking to a very senior professional. So he said there are certain items which we get as a gift when we do chartered accountancy, and one of that gift is this spectacle. So all of us are so much study oriented that our eyes are, there's a lot of exercise we need to do for eyes. But generally, when I meet with people of our students of our profession, generally they are, of course, they like cricket, but they like watching cricket. They like hockey, but they like to watch. So I try to encourage my fellow colleagues that okay, we can pick up one or other hobby so that we can remain physically fit. So thank you so much. So that is a very elaborate one. So Ranjit sir, okay, now I can share my slides. So
Yes.
if you allow, I will start the presentation. Can I start?
Oh,
Or
sir, yes, sir. You can, sir.
okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see it,
Yes.
sir.
Yes.
Yes, now it's very clear. Yes.
Okay. So, thank you very much, friends Ranjit ji, Mr. Jose, Mr. I would like to specifically mention Mr. Srivats for, giving introduction and allowing us to connect again. So, we have our partner PNR Kamat Bhai in Kochi. So whenever I visit there and it's long time because of this lockdown, we could not catch up with each other. But thanks to you, we are again connecting with the Kochi people. So the presentation, I was having a discussion with Ranjit sir that what topic can be picked up. So we thought that maybe a lot of audits are being done now. A lot of companies are reporting under Ind AS. So we can have some kind of a series of challenges which we face while carrying out audits in Ind AS environment. So I had a discussion and Ranjit sir kindly agreed to the topic. And we said that in the first lecture on the series can be on these consolidation and related party. So what I did was I prepared a presentation on this consolidation and related parties. Uh, I will just stop sharing the screen and will bring another presentation for you, which will help you understand the background also. Just give me 1 minute. So my laptop is creating some challenges here. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir. Now we can see it. Yes, sir. It's clear.
Okay, so what I have done in this presentation, because it is a series of discussions over IND-AS and it will happen during next coming weeks or months or during the next year. So what I will do is this is how I have structured today's presentation. In the first portion, I will share with you some accounting stories, some very interesting accounting stories. And then I will move on to how the financial statements are prepared in India. Then I will highlight the subjectivity and the complexity of presenting financial statements and what kind of issues, what kind of corporate frauds can happen in financial statements. After that, I will move to this standards part, which is the consolidation and the related parties. But my idea of sharing, this presentation is not to teach accounting standard. I trust that most of you have read accounting standards and you're aware of IND-AS. I would bring a macro level view on the kind of issues which come up when we are doing the audit. So I will be touching upon some interesting part when we are doing audits of the financial statements which are prepared under IND-AS. So I'll be touching upon the audits. I'll be sharing some of the case studies with you. I'll be sharing some accounting stories with you. I'll be talking about how the financial statements and the frauds can happen in the financial statements. So the end product after 1.5 hours when we will close this session, you will be having a little bit of idea that as an auditor, what are the areas you need to be careful about? What are the areas you need to pick up when you are doing the audit and how you should protect yourself as an auditor? What kind of documents you should be collecting from your clients? So basic idea is to talk to all of you as qualified CAs and people who are in practice and give share my knowledge of different experiences which I had in my last 30 years. And also we'll be sharing with you some new developments which are happening at the institute level on technical side. So first of all, some accounting story. There are 3 accounting stories which I would like to highlight here. All these accounting stories will have common thread, and I will highlight what a common thread I am talking about. So there was a company called WorldCom. It was US second largest, telecom company, and there was a huge scandal which came into exposure, and this scandal came after Enron one. So Enron I am not picking up because Enron everyone is aware about, but this company WorldCom, the allegations were that they were underreporting the expenses and they were capitalizing these expenses. So, for example, if they have spent money on repair and maintenance, instead of showing it as an expense, they were capitalizing that. Okay, this is plant and machinery or building or whatever the property, plant and equipment. So, whichever way they were capitalizing it. So the amount was not small. It was $3.8 billion. So they were overstated as capital expense rather than operating expense. So as a result, the company was showing a very nice, very healthy, very profitable picture to the users of the financial statement. So this accounting scandal came into picture and it created a lot of havoc in our accounting and auditing industry. There was another scandal which came into picture, was a Japanese company named as Kanebo Limited. It was a very, very old company, more than 100 years old company. And major accounting fraud came into picture which was very unique thing in Japan, when this was one of the largest fraud. So what allegations they put, that this company was also inflating their profit, and during last 5-year period they had inflated profits by 2 billion. So they were either not showing the expenses as expense, or they were showing extra revenue in order to show healthy profits. Third case which I want to share with you is very close to our country. It's our own Satyam. This company was, almost every chartered accountant is aware of this particular fraud. Uh, this was having presence in 67 countries and more than 50,000 employees. And this accounting scandal, when came into picture, a lot of issues came up, and one of the big four was the auditor. So the people who signed their audit report were sent behind the bars. There were people who were, their certificate of practice was cancelled for the whole life. And those people, so this company, it's a very detailed case study on how this company could do the accounting fraud. This is a typical case study, a typical example of how accounting fraud can happen. So what this company did, they inflated cash and bank balances for more than 1 crores and crores of rupees, overstated their debtors position and understated their liability. So they were showing that we have fixed deposits in the banks, whereas those fixed deposits were not there. Now, when the audit team went and did, their audit, so they asked the management. So this happened in a very typical manner, the way when you go and do bank branch audits, or you are doing audit of a large company or a subsidiary of a very large company which is listed company. So this company went and told the auditors that, okay, we would like to finish the audit within next 15-20 days. You let us know what all you need from us. So these, managers and the audit team, they went and they said that, sir, we have this checklist on the basis of which we will need to complete the audit. So one of the checklist item is that we need a bank confirmation. So the company said, you don't worry about the bank confirmation, that we will bring it to you. You carry out your own procedures, you fill up your checklist and you do your audit. So these people, said, okay, fine. So please provide us the bank confirmation letters. So company, what they did, they got, those confirmation letter printed in their own office. They were forged confirmation letters and provided it to the auditors. And auditors say that, they looked at the file that, okay, did you get the confirmation letter? Yes, we got bank confirmation letter, and check the box. And, later on they realized that those balances were never there in the bank. So the company went ahead and also booked interest on those FDs. So FDs were not there, so interest income was taken. And then they were also issuing some fictitious invoices. Invoices were raised which were not actual invoices in order to show higher income. And then because the invoices were raised, the debtors were also increased. They did not show some liabilities. So when the matter went to SFIO and when they investigated the matter, they realized that the auditors were negligent, and there were criminal charges, and there were all kind of issues around the audit happened. So institute also took disciplinary action and banned those people who were involved in the audit from so they put a ban on them doing the audits. So this case study had shaken the way Indian audits were done. A lot of people, they said that we used to take confirmations like that only, whereas the negligence or default on the auditors were that they did not go to bank independently and took the confirmation. They did not write to the bank for a confirmation letter on the balances which were there. So this basically, all these three case studies, they convey one most important part. And that important part is we should not be swayed by the brand name of the company. All these companies were having a very big brand name. Second, they were all trying to show very good profits. And third, they were all very reputed companies. So basically, when you are doing an audit, you need to be very, very careful. There are, frauds can happen in any company. So there was a report to the nations by, ACFE, and this is slightly old report, but it conveys, this is about fraud scenario. So they said that, when you calculate the companies in the world, estimate loss of due to fraud is approximately 5% of the revenue. But most important part which I wanted to highlight was that there are frauds which are related to asset misappropriation. That means people taking away and using the assets of the company. That was most common fraud. That means 89% of the fraud cases were related to that. But it was least costly. That means it was, average loss or maiden loss was 114,000 US dollars. Whereas financial statement fraud, it was not very, very common in comparison to other frauds. That means only 10% of the cases. But it was a huge loss to, to the company and to the stakeholders, which was 800,000 average loss. So financial statement frauds, they result in huge losses to the stakeholders. Like, for example, we were talking about Satyam. So share price was 500. So suppose somebody had, 1,000 shares. So that person was having 500,000 worth. And all of a sudden the share price came back to 18. So 18,000 was his, investment. A huge loss to that person. So this report also said that 85% of the fraudster never charged or convicted. And then they also said that internal control weakness, more than approximately half of the frauds were because of internal control weakness. So why I have highlighted this internal control weakness is that now, when you are doing audit of a large company or a bigger company or a listed company, or a large private company, you need to make a report on internal control on financial reporting. So this report need to be done very, very carefully. Some of you are doing internal audits. So there's one important information for you, that 15% of these frauds were caught by internal auditor. 30% were caught by the management, and 7% frauds came into picture due to accident. Like, for example, somebody was not on the seat and somebody else came to the seat. They saw some papers lying there, picked up and realized that there is something going wrong here. And half of the frauds were caught by way of tips. So somebody asked, so I was having a session with the CAG officials. So there were CAG officials of approximately 42 countries, and we were having a discussion over Satyam case. I was making a presentation. So one of the CAG officials stood up and asked the question, how did this Satyam fraud, who caught this fraud? How did people come to know about this fraud? Then I told them that this is a letter which was written by the promoter himself. He wrote to the board of directors, and he also came on a social media in the television and announced that there was an accounting fraud which was happening. So basically, when you are doing an audit, when you are doing an internal audit, and when you are doing an audit of financial statements as statutory auditor, you need to be careful that these corporate frauds can happen everywhere. So one of the interesting part in the report is that 85% of the fraudsters, they displayed at least one behavior red flag. So that means a person who is living beyond means. Like, for example, I can share with you, when I was an article clerk and I had gone to do an audit of a small company, I realized that their salesperson, he was, a new fresh graduate who had joined the company 6 months ago. But he was riding a very, at that time, the Honda bike was there. So he had purchased that Honda bike and he was smoking very costly cigarette. And he was living, which was like, enjoying all his hobbies. So I was wondering that he should be from a very good family and he should be having a lot of money his father might have. But then later on we came to know that he was from a very simple family, but basically he was doing some kind of frauds and taking away money which is company's money to spend on his own self. Then another red flag, that financial difficulties. For some time I was working in a bank, and we have a cashier, and that cashier took away some money from the cash box because his son was unwell and he wanted to get his treatment done. He was thinking that after 4 days, when I will get my salary, I'll return the money. But in between that period, an inspection happened, and somebody from the head office came and counted the cash, and they realized that 5,000 rupees are less. But financial difficulty is also one of the red flag. So unusually close association with vendor or a customer is also one of the red flag, which people demonstrate. If they are too cozy with a vendor, so that means there is a possibility of fraud happening there. Then excessive control and unwillingness to share duties was also one of the flag. Refusal to take vacation. So many times, these large companies, it is compulsory if you are working in that company to go on leave. Too good to be true. If you have seen that series which has come on Harshad Mehta, so there is a clerk in a bank which is, traveling by air, and, they are heavy gold purchase which is doing. So that is basically a syndrome, which is indication of some kind of collusion, that these things are too good to be true. That person is going for a foreign tour and is not taking any advance or those kind of things. Then abnormally slow in performing routine work. I think this you might have seen in a lot of government offices. And social isolation. People who are involved in those frauds, they don't interact and intermingle with the other people around. So why I'm sharing all these red flag is, when you are doing an audit, and whether it is Ind AS audit or whether you are doing internal audits, you need to see whether there are any red flags in that. And these corporate frauds, they may have everybody who is doing a fraud will have a rationalization. They will have a justification for their dishonest action. They will always have an opportunity, and there will be some kind of a pressure which will. So this is a triangle which gets completed in resulting in frauds. So there are some genesis when the corporate fraud, the financial statement frauds happen. Sometimes the errors get unnoticed and person comes to know that if this is an error, nobody will notice it. So let us continue with this, and then they take advantage. So if a company has done incorrect invoicing and you have gone and done the audit and you could not catch that, the company will feel that this auditor will never be able to catch my revenue. So the person can bring out, more and more those kind of invoices. So your audit team, or when you are doing the audit, you need to be extremely careful. System deficiencies, weak internal controls. We see that every time a financial statement is prepared, suppose there is a mistake which has happened. So generally the tendency of the auditor is that, please, there is a mistake, please get it corrected, and the management will correct it. But it is important to know that how that mistake has happened, whether it was intentional, whether it was unintentional, whether there was a control weakness. To share with you, we were doing audit of a bank, and we realized that some kind of a mistake happened, and the bankers, they corrected that mistake. But later on, after 3-4 years, another friend of us went to the bank and same mistake was happening again. because they did not correct the system. They just removed the person from the chair and deputed him to somewhere else. But there was an anomaly in the system which needed to be corrected. Then top level executives, many times they are too much dependent on accountants. That is also resulting in, especially in India's environment, when we are, preparing financial statement, there's a lot of substance which is involved in India's financial statements. So one need to be very, very careful, that whether everything is left to the accountants or not. So these are, some ideas about how the corporate frauds and the financial statement frauds can happen. And one need to be extremely careful while doing audit of the companies which are large companies or subsidiary of large companies. And most of you are doing branch audits. So you need to be careful about, keep on the back of your mind that there are financial statement frauds which happen. So basically, as per the framework of Ind AS, so I'll just few slides I will share on the background of Ind AS, and then I will go to the consolidation related part. So financial statements are basically prepared to help user taking a decision. Why do we make financial statements? I will give you an example that in one of the jurisdiction we were reading their framework. They said that here it is required for a company to make financial statement in order to help management taking a decision. So those are kind of internal financial statements. But what we are talking about is general purpose financial statements, so that every user can take a decision based on information which is coming out of these financial statements. The objective of statements is given in the framework. So one needs to know the financial position of the company. That's the purpose for which balance sheet is prepared. Then one needs to know the performance of the company, for which the statement of profit and loss is prepared. And then one needs to know changes in financial position, for which the cash flow statements are prepared. So these are the objectives why we prepare these statements. And there can be different kind of users. There can be internal users, which are like management, the officers, the auditors. They will all look into these financial statements. There can be external users also, shareholders, lenders, customers, bankers, regulators. The income tax officer will look at your financial statement and will decide how much tax they need to pay. If any inquiry is happening or any scrutiny is happening, they will, first thing they will ask is, show us your financial statements, show us your balance sheet, and then they will decide that, okay, you have correctly paid the income tax or a GST or not. So there are a few characteristics, and this is specific to Ind AS. Of course, Indian accounting standard, the other accounting standards are also prepared on the basis of similar framework. So there are characteristics which need to be there. These financial statements, when they are prepared, they should be understandable. So anybody who is reading the financial statements, who is reading the balance sheet, the notes to account, should carry information which will make you understand what this company is all about, what this partnership firm is all about, what this organization is all about. So the number should be understandable. That is why, if you see the name, earlier we used to call profit and loss account. Now the name has changed. It is now called statement of profit and loss. Since we are all chartered accountants and we have studied commerce, we are very comfortable with the name profit and loss account. But somebody who is from a different jurisdiction, when they look at this term profit and loss account, they say that, what do you mean by, so there is an account which is having a profit and a loss? It doesn't make any sense. So when, when Ind AS came, the IFRS came, they said it is showing, it is a statement which is showing either profit or loss. So let us change the name. So, it is basically, the idea is that your financial statements should be understandable. across the jurisdiction. Wherever you are, you should be in a position to understand what it is all about. These should carry relevant information. Unnecessary information should not be there. And all the important relevant information should be there in these financial statement. How much is the turnover? How much is the expense? How much is the profit? What are the assets? What are the liabilities? How did the cash move? All the relevant information should be there in these financial statements. Then these balance sheets and statement of P&L, they are signed by many people. Why? Why they require two directors to sign on the balance sheet? Why do they need a signature of auditor on the balance sheet? Why in a large company you need a company secretary to sign the balance sheet? It is because they want these statements to be reliable. So everybody has looked into these financial statement and they can put their signature saying that, okay, these carry reliable information. Now somebody asked me where it is written that, Indian financial statements in India, we are following substance over form. So we are having a principle based accounting. So it is coming out of the framework. So all of you are qualified people and you are aware what is substance, what is form. So we need to be careful. But when you are doing bank audits, you need to be aware of that. The bank, the branches, they follow guidelines which are given by the Reserve Bank of India. And those guidelines are kind of a rule which need to be followed. So there are exceptions, but broadly speaking, substance over form is what we follow in our, in our country. These financial statements should be comparable. Not only the previous year numbers should be given, but also the numbers which are of a similar company should be given. Now, friends, a very interesting observation which I want to share with you. Many of you are doing a small and medium practice. You are running your practices. There are many proprietorship firms or many partnership firms or the trust or the societies where you are doing the audit. Now, somebody asked me a question, that here is a balance sheet of this trust or this proprietorship. We are doing a tax audit. So the previous year numbers are not necessary to be given. So please note that as per the framework, comparability is one of the qualitative characteristics. So you need to have comparable numbers from the previous year in front of the current year numbers. It is required as per Ind AS, as per accounting standards as well. Prudence is also one of the characteristics, and complete financial statement. They should give you complete information. So why I shared this slide with you is to so that you are aware that these financial statements which you are auditing or when you are preparing or when your client is preparing, you need to know, when you are Ind AS compliant, you need to be very careful about complying with these qualitative characteristics. Now I come to the complexity in our country. India works on a multi-regulator model. So that means there are different regulators for different kind of companies. So let us say your client forms a company or you form a company. You say that, okay, this is a private limited company. And this company will be regulated by the registrar of companies. So you will, as per the company law, you will prepare your financial statement. But if this company is doing banking business, so your regulator is Reserve Bank of India. If this company is a housing finance company, then National Housing Bank. If this company starts doing insurance business, then you have a different regulator. So there are different regulators for different kind of entities. Now I come to the accounting standards. You have those regulators also, and you have interesting structure of accounting standards also. So basically you need to prepare your financial statements. So on one side you have a company law which guides you how to prepare your financial statements. On the other side, there are regulators like Reserve Bank of India, SEBI, IRDA, which will tell you how to prepare the financial statement, which format, which are the regulations which you need to follow. And then there are accounting standards which need to be followed. So if you are a foreign company, you are reporting to your head office, you need to report in IFRS, which is International Financial Reporting Standards. If you are a large private company or a listed company in India, you will need to follow accounting standards, which are Ind AS, which are converged with IFRS. And if you are not a company, not a large company, but you are a smaller company or non-corporate entity, then you will be following accounting standards. So these accounting standards are for company, which are published in the Gazette under the Companies Act. And then if you are not a company, then there are standards for, which are published by the Institute of Chartered Accountants. So recently there has been a change. So earlier we used to study that for non-company or non-corporate, non-company entities, there were level 1, level 2, level 3. Now please be aware that now another level has been added, and more there has been a change in the limits. So now level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 entities are there, for which different accounting standards will be applicable and some exemptions will be given. But it doesn't stop there. There are standards which are applicable for government sector. There are ICDS, Income Computation and Disclosure Standards, and then there are cost standards. The idea is that these financial statements should be prepared in order to help user taking a decision. So it is very important to note that when you are reporting under IFRS, under Ind AS, you also need to report on ICOFR, which is internal controls. And please note that in case the documentation is there, you need to make report accordingly. There are different kind of models which are available. So maybe I'll discuss with Ranjit ji, and we can have another session on specifically on internal financial control. So there are some case studies which I will share with you. So revenue recognition, let us say a company has purchased engine with 1 lakh engine and sold 1 lakh engine, and opening stock was there, closing stock was there. It seems to be very simple. Whatever profit they have made, 2 crore, sales minus purchase, 2 crore profit. But there may be instances that the company is showing incorrect revenue. So there are two types of frauds or incorrect accounting which can happen. In one side, they can show excess revenue. On the other side, some company may show less revenue. The fact is, you as auditor need to see whether the financial statements are showing true and fair picture or not. So there are various ways in which they may increase their revenue and show it in your financial statements. Basically, these large companies, the case studies which we shared. So excess revenue is shared when sale return and you do not book that sale return. There was a major accounting scandal, fraud happened when this large company in India was selling goods to their own storehouse and were cutting invoices and excise and everything was being paid, and they were showing it as a revenue. Sometimes the discounts were not adjusted. Basically, when companies are showing high revenue, they need to show good picture. And some companies, they would show less revenue in order to avoid the tax or personal advantage. They would do sale of something without raising an invoice. They will send goods as sample. They will have some kind of agreement with the distributors. And there are many more possibilities and many more reasons which can be there. So one need to be careful that once you are doing an audit, you need to be more careful. There are, high risk areas. Revenue is always a high risk area. Many companies, they try to show gross revenue in order to show a high turnover. There can be artificial sale, there can be commission. A lot of old generation chartered accountancy firms, they are aware that sometimes people were not even selling the goods, they were just cutting the invoices. Sometimes the sales to sell for high C sales, these are the revenue recognition related frauds. So another case study I would like to share with you in order to highlight how, while doing accounting, people, they are able to play with the numbers. So this company which I am talking about was having a policy of having depreciation rates which are equivalent to income tax rates. So, as you are aware that there are rates given, earlier there was a schedule which was giving minimum depreciation rates, and then there was a schedule in the income tax, the different depreciation rates were given. So what this company was doing was charging income tax rates in their books of accounts, whereas Schedule 14 was having lower rates. For many years they were doing it. So when new management came, they said that okay, there we had been charging excess depreciation since past. So let us change the pattern, and all those expenses which we have charged in the past, I need to reverse those. They said that I will change the depreciation style, and that time AS6 was also applicable. Now AS6 has already merged with AS10, depreciation related standard that allowed if management wants to have a depreciation according to any both the schedules are possible. AS1 says that in case there is a change, you need to make a disclosure. The company said we will make a disclosure. There is no harm. We don't want to hide anything. AS5 says that in case there is a previous year correction, you can do in this year itself. So when they looked into the depreciation which was charged on depreciation rates as per Income Tax Act, so when they tried to change it to the company law rate, they realized that there is 109 crore rupees of profit which can be booked. So when the auditors looked into it, they realized that this company is doing good. I mean, they want to make all the disclosures, the depreciation, the accounting standards are permitting. So there was one very thin line on which, there was a decision. So one of the clause in accounting standards said that in case you are changing your depreciation from method of method of charging depreciation, if you are changing, then it is a change in policy. If you are changing just the rates, then it is your change in estimates. And in case you are changing a policy, then you can have a retrospective effect. But in case you are changing only the rates, it can be only prospective. You cannot change your estimate from the past. So very clear. So this is a very thin line. If the company was changing their depreciation policy from written down to straight line or straight line to written down, then it is a change in policy. You need to make correction from the past. But if you just want to change the depreciation rates, it cannot be done from the past. It has to be done prospectively. Why? Because the depreciation rates are estimates. And the accounting policy is whether it is a written down method or a straight line method or any other method. Then it is, so if you are changing the policy, you need to go back and make correction from the beginning. If you are changing the rates, then change in estimates. So in this case, if they were charging depreciation rates as per the Income Tax Act and they just wanted to change the rates, it was not an error in the past. It was estimate of the past which cannot be changed now. If you want to change the depreciation rates, it can be changed now onwards. not going to the past. So this was a very interesting case which had come. So finally, company changed their accounting policy and could do a retrospective change. So when you are doing the audit, you need to ensure that which role you are playing. When you are doing a statutory audit, you are an independent entity. You are an independent professional. You are, not eyes and ears of the management. You are eyes and ears of the society. There is an independent role which you are playing. So it is not a policeman. It is a different role which you are playing, and you are going to give an opinion. And there is a responsibility which comes to you when you are playing a role as an independent professional. When you are doing a forensic audit, then you are playing a role of a policeman. You will go and try to find evidence. When you are doing, audit and audit for some particular procedure, so there is a little bit of definition of watchdog, which we used to read in the when we used to study commerce. But I think now the role of auditors have changed. It's no more a watchdog. You're not a consultant when you're doing a statutory audit or internal audit. If you are helping the client as a consultant, company law, clearly says that management services are not allowed for statutory auditors. They cannot give management services. And then, if you are just a consultant, then you can work as a catalyst also. But when you are auditors, you are not. And please remember, when you are taking a responsibility as an auditor, what I'm saying is also the tax auditor. This is important. So there are auditing standards which have been issued by AASB. There are standards for assurance services. There are standards for related services. There are different standards which have been issued by AASB. Just to give you a glimpse, today's session is not on auditing standards, but there is a standard on audit. Just to share with you a very brief overview, there are standards on auditing which are for historical financial information. There are standards for review engagement. There are standards for assurance engagement, and there are standards for related services. One need to be careful about these standards which have been issued by AASB. So maybe we can have another round of discussion when we are talking about auditing standards, and we'll go into details of that. Now we come to consolidated financial statements under Ind AS. So there's a very unique situation which was existing in the previous standards, which are AS21. The AS21, when you look at the standard, there is an ascetic mark which has been given there. And in the footnote, it says that this standard will be applicable when you are preparing consolidating financial statements under any statute. So that means this standard does not mandate when to do the consolidation. That mandate had to come from somewhere else. And if you are doing those consolidation, then AS21 will be applicable. But when you come to Ind AS, this Ind AS 110 consolidated financial statements, it tells you that when you have a control over an entity, you need to prepare consolidated financial statements. So if your client is having Ind AS, they need to prepare consolidated financial statements in case they fulfill the conditions which are given in this particular standard. So even in the Companies Law, Companies Act section 129(3), all companies having subsidiary or associates need to prepare consolidated financial statements. And there are conditions, and then there are exemptions which are given. But the scheme of Ind AS for consolidated financial statements. So if your client has a subsidiary, if you have a subsidiary, then Ind AS 110 will be applicable. You will need to do line by line disclosure, consolidation. If you have joint agreements, joint arrangements, then you will need to apply Ind AS 111 and 28. So in case you have joint ventures, the equity method of accounting will be applicable. If you have joint operations, then proportionate consolidation method will be applicable. In case you have associate entity, you will need to apply equity method. So this is the broad scheme of consolidation under Ind AS. So 110 gives you guidance on how to do consolidation. I give you one example. So let us say you have a client which is, selling some kind of machinery, and this client has another subsidiary company which is also dealing in the same thing, and another company which is also dealing in the same thing. So if the parent company sells this machine to the subsidiary, and let us say value of the machine is 100, so they are selling it for 100 to B, and that B is selling it to C. So A is showing sales on standalone as 100, B is showing sale of 100 standalone, and C is having an inventory of 100. But when you consolidate, it will not be that the group has got a sale of 200. There is zero sale for the group because the machinery is still with the group. So you need to do line by line consolidation. In case these are subsidiary companies, and then there are different kind of arrangements which this company may have, and there can be an associate. So ballpark number is generally if you have 50% of the shareholding, you may have control. In case you have more than 20% of the shareholding, you may have an associate. But when you talk about subsidiaries, the definition of control is given in quite detail. And when you do not have a control, but you have a significant influence, then your, this associate will come into picture. And I'll go in a little bit of detail. Ind AS 110 is similar to its equivalent, or in Ind AS you have 110. In old accounting standards you had Ind AS 21, or existing accounting standards which are not Ind AS. So if you remember that slide where I had shown different kind of accounting standards existing in our country. So AS 21 is accounting standard for non-Ind AS entities. So Ind AS 111 is for joint agreements, and it is similar to IFRS, absolutely replica of IFRS, but AS 23 gives you advice on accounting for investment in associates. So this is the broad scheme of Ind AS 110. So what is the highlight of Ind AS 110? Concept of control is different here. It is not a rule based, it is substance based, as I had mentioned in my framework slide. It is required mandatorily to do a consolidation when you are following an Ind AS. So if somebody asks you that, there was a session on Ind AS, what did you learn from that session? So you can, say that in old accounting standards, the consolidation was not mandatory as per the standard. Standard was applied when there is a requirement of consolidation. But in Ind AS, if you have a control, if you have a subsidiary, it is mandatory to have a consolidation. This is one difference which is a very, very significant one. And this 110 also gives you guidance on disposal of subsidiary company. And in case you lose control over the company, then this standard will give you guidance on that. This standard also talks about potential voting rights. So many times there are some restrictions in a particular jurisdiction that the company cannot hold more than 49%, or those kind of restrictions are there. But they indirectly control, the entity. So in case control is there, even if it is indirect control, that will come into picture. Then there is introduction of detailed disclosure, which is there, and new guidance for control.
ഇപ്പൊ
So
ഇമെയിലൊരു ഒറിജിനൽ ഡീഡ് നഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് മാത്സ് ഉണ്ട് അതും
Testy. Kindly mute. Hello. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can
Yeah.
proceed.
Yeah. So there are parameters of control, which are, like I said, that, okay, there is a requirement of, looking into the substance. When you will say that, okay, I have a control on this company. So there are three broad parameters that one need to have power. So even if you are not holding 50%, if you are holding, let us say 30% or 40%, but you have power, you have exposure or rights to the variable return, and your ability to affect the return. So you have ability to use your power. So many times you can see that, okay, there is a company which is holding 55%, but actual control is with someone else. So even though they have power, but they are not controlling. So, the concept of control will not come into play. The subsidiary will be consolidated with the parent who has got the control. So power over the investee, the parameter is very, very important part. Sometimes more than 50% is an indication. Other times, the control over the board of directors is also an indication. So existing rights to direct relevant activities. So the word relevant has been explained in detail in the standard, that what is relevant, what is not relevant, what is relevant activity, what is not relevant activity, and whether this right to direct these activity, whether it will fall under the definition of power or not, whether the exposure to rights, whether the possible variability to positive and negative return, whether this holding company can control this, or whether this company is able to make a decision and use that power. So these are the parameters on which control will be checked, whether this company is a subsidiary or not. In case the parameters of controls are met, then the holding company will do line by line consolidation of this subsidiary company. So there are different ways through which you can see whether there is power or not. More than 50% voting right is one indication, but less than 50% voting is also can result into control where you have a de facto control. I gave an example of controlling the board. There can be other possibilities also where you can have a power over the investee. There can be contractual right, there can be practical abilities, there can be special relationship, and there can be, debt and purchase, sales agreements, and all those kind of stuff, which can prove that there is a power over the investee. And similar kind of guidance is given for exposure to variable return from an investee and ability to use this. So what is critical is you need to go to the substance and understand whether there is a power or there is no power. If they have the power, whether they have an ability to use the power or not. So I would like to explain the concept with the help of a case study. So let us say there is a company called A. They acquire 48% of the voting rights. Now see carefully. They do not have more than 50% voting rights. They have got 48%. But remaining voting rights are held by thousands of shareholders, and none of them is holding 1% even. All small shareholders. So two questions will come into picture. First question is naturally whether A has a control or not. And second question is who will decide whether A has control or not. So any of you would like to respond to this? Okay, I'll explain. The first is that who will decide. So basically, the holding company itself will decide whether I have a control over this entity or not. So when you look at this case, A will need to take a decision whether A controls this entity or not. And if they control it, then they will need to do a line by line consolidation. Now, somebody can start a debate that if A wants to manipulate and if they do not want to do consolidation because subsidiaries are carrying losses and all those kind of stuff, then then this becomes a corporate governance issue. There are various ways and means through which there are control mechanism that A should not take incorrect decision. So to give you an example, there is an internal audit system, there is a board of directors, there is an independent or there are independent directors, then there is an audit committee, then there is a statutory auditor who will also look into this decision whether 48%. But in this particular case, whether A controls or not, I think anybody with a common sense will say that A has a control, because even though they are not holding for 50%, but they are holding more than enough, sufficient to give you control. 48% voting right. You will have your own chairman on the board and you will have your own board of directors. You will change the auditor as and when you want. So none of the other shareholders, who are thousands of them, will vote against you. It's not possible that all 52% people will come and vote against. Many of them will never come and vote. So 48% interest would be sufficient to control. So who will conclude? The person A himself will conclude that they have got sufficient voting interest and they meet the criteria of power. Now let us expand the case study and go to another case study where A holds 45% of the voting rights and other two shareholders, they are holding 26%, and remaining voting rights are held by the three shareholders. So whether A controls or not, now this A can come and say, I don't think that I have a control over this entity. Why? Because these two people can outvote me anytime. I mean, there is a possibility that two people will get together, they will have 52% voting right, and they will just reject my idea. So what power I have in this company? I do not control the company. So in this case, the size of, it's not only the size of A, but relative size of other shareholders, that is sufficient to conclude that investor A does not have power. So only two other investors would need to cooperate with each other to prevent investor A from directing the relevant activities. Now, when we do consolidation, we will need to do consolidation line by line. So that means you will add sales to the sales, you will add purchase to the purchase, and assets and liabilities and everything you will add. And in case there is a transaction, like I shared an example that A will sell to B, B will sell to C. So whatever intragroup transaction, so you will need to remove that A made a sale, but it was to their own entity, their own subsidiary. Remove this sale. This process is called elimination. So one needs to eliminate transactions between the parties. So only then you will have a consolidated picture, correct picture. And then there are some other requirements, like for example, you need to have uniform accounting policies for preparing consolidated financial statements. In case, so this is requirement of Ind AS, that you need to have not more than 3 months gap when you are preparing your financial statements under Ind AS and you are doing a consolidation. So basically, if you are doing a consolidation, you can always, you will need to reproduce the financial statements in case there is a gap of more than 3 months. Then there are joint arrangements. So two companies can get into joint arrangement, which can be, jointly managed. The single party cannot control the agreement. You need to have, so to give you an example, simple example, that if two people are signing on the check can be presented to the bank and instruction is given to the bank that two people will sign only, then it will be passing. That is an example, typical example of joint control, that two people jointly control the arrangement. And, one person, if person doesn't sign, the other person will not be able to carry on the function. And decision about relevant activity requires unanimous consent of the participants. Both should be agreeable. When we talk about example or a case study, so let us say two parties A and B establish an arrangement in which both will have 50-50 voting rights. And they agree in writing after signing that at least 50% of the voting rights are required to make decision. So naturally, they have agreed that we will need to go to each other in order to get 51%. So there is a joint venture. So the joint arrangements can have joint control, and there can be two ways of doing it. One way is that you can have joint venture. You make a separate company or an entity, and if you make like that, then you will need to see how much is your right in the net asset. Or there may be a situation where you have joint operation. So like, you are maintaining an airport and you are sending some machinery, the other person is sending something else. Then whatever machinery you are sending, you will account for that machinery in your asset. Whatever machinery is sent by other person, they will have that accounted for. Whatever expenses you are doing, you are writing in your books of accounts. So basically the joint operation accounting is done like that. So when you have joint operations, they are basically not structured. But in case you have a separate vehicle or a company or an entity for, then you will have a joint venture. So if you have a joint venture, how to do the accounting? You will need to use equity method of accounting. And if you have joint operation, you will need proportionate consolidation. The areas or the items which belong to you will come into your financial statements. The items which belong to the other person, the other joint venturer, the other joint operation holder, it will go to their area. So you will need to do accounting accordingly. So what is equity method of accounting? So let us say you have invested 1,000. So whatever is the cost of investment in your joint venture plus whatever share of profit and less the dividend received. So that means I will explain with the help of an example. So let us say you have invested 1,000 rupees in an associate. The associate does earn some profit during the year, and the profit is 100, out of which 80 rupees has been distributed as dividend. So you have received part of 80 rupees as your this thing. So what is your method of accounting? So you initially invested 1,000. The remaining profit with the entity is 20. So 1,000 plus your portion of 20 becomes your value under equity method. So it is one line item, investment in associates. So this equity method is being used when you have associates. That means you do not have a control, but you have a significant influence. That means generally more than 20% is the voting right, or you may affect their, you may have an influence over their day-to-day decisions. So this is the significant influence definition is given here. Power to participate in financial and operating policy decisions, and more than 20% shareholding. So this this is seen as significant influence. So when you have an associate, you will use equity method of accounting. There's another standard in Ind AS, which is Ind AS 105. In case you have an asset held for sale, you will value it in accordance with Ind AS 105. But in case you have a control, then 110 will apply. But your exemptions are similar, and those exemptions are in detail given in the standard itself. So you will need to do disclosures as per Ind AS 112. So for subsidiaries, you will need to have a composition of the group. You will need to have a non-controlling interest. I'll take a pause here and explain to you what is non-controlling interest. So let us say you have a subsidiary in which you have a shareholding of 80%. Now, what you do is you are doing line by line consolidation. So turnover of the company, you add it to your turnover. Expenses, you added. Assets, you added. Liabilities, you added. Everything you added to your balance sheet. But you say, hey, stop. I do not own this company 100%. I own it only 80%. What about the 20%? Why are we adding everything into my financial statements? So that 20% is non-controlling interest for which the adjustment will be done under the line. So that means there is always a non-controlling interest in case it is not a 100% subsidiary. Now you will say that earlier we used to call it minority interest. In Ind AS, why you are calling it a non-controlling interest? Why did you not use the word minority interest? So like I explained in my slide on the framework, now you are able to connect all the slides which we have been sharing. So this is substance over form. Let us say you have 40% shareholding in the company and 60% belongs to somebody else. But you have a complete control over that entity because the whole board of directors and there are agreements and everything. So according to Ind AS, because it is substance-based accounting, you will decide that, okay, this is my subsidiary. Because I have a control over it, because I have a power and I am having an ability to use my power to direct the relevant activities. Now, if you are having 40% interest and other people are having 60% interest, they are not minority. They are non-controlling interest. So that's why this term which is used is that if I am controlling, the other people will become non-controlling. But it is not necessary that they are minority. They can be having more shares than me, but because I am controlling, I am consolidating it. Then there are in case there are restrictions in terms of group assets, using the group assets that need to be disclosed. This is specifically. So the scheme is under 112. You will need to make a disclosures. All that disclosures have been given. How the disclosures are supposed to be done is given in Ind AS 112. A separate standard has been prepared in order to do the disclosures. Then consequences of changing in the ownership is also to be mentioned in the financial statements. Then in case you have joint agreements and associates, what kind of disclosures do you need to have? Nature and effect of contractual relationship, nature and changes in the risk associated with the joint ventures and associates, disclosed name, relationships, principal place of business. So when we see the question paper which comes in the institute, we see questions around whether it is it is a control, it is an associates, it is a joint arrangement, and what kind of disclosures are required. Then there are disclosures which are required for unconsolidated structured entities. So all those current intentions to provide financial or other support to unconsolidated structured entity. So many times the question is asked that, you know, when there is a guarantee given to somebody, which is, you know, structured entity, but we do not have a control whether to make a disclosure or not. So there is an answer which is coming out of Ind AS 112. Carrying amount of the assets and liabilities, it has to be disclosed, and qualitative and quantitative information about interested and consolidated structure entities. So if we compare AS21 with Ind AS 110, it was not mandatory to prepare CFS, Consolidated Financial Statement, under AS1. I told you there is an asterisk and there is a footnote which says that in case you are required to do consolidation, apply this standard. But in Ind AS 110, it is mandatory that if you have a control, you need to apply this standard. This is what the main take home for today's session. Investment entity is not defined in AS21. It has been defined accordingly. Exemptions have been given. Definition of control in AS21. If you have more than 51%, if you control the board, you are having a control. In Ind AS, go to the basics. Go to not the form but the substance. Definition which is given in paragraph 6 and elaborated in paragraph 7 of Ind AS 110. When you meet all the conditions, you have power, you have ability to use power, your ability to direct the relevant activities, all those parameters need to be defined. So if you remember that slide of parameters which are defining the powers. Then temporary control in AS21, there was an exemption which was given. In Ind AS 110, there is no such exemption. But remember, there is Ind AS 105, which is there to regulate, to guide on, held for sale. Non-controlling interest, they are presented separately from liabilities and the equity. But in Ind AS 110, they are within the equity, but separately from the equity of the owners of the parents. Then we have other standards, AS 23 and 27, which, there are three broad types: jointly controlled operation, jointly controlled assets, and jointly controlled entities. Here it is a joint venture or joint operations in Ind AS 110, 111. So a uniform accounting policy was not mandatory in AS 23 and 27. It is mandatory in Ind AS 110, 111. Unit of accounting, there is no guidance, but some guidance has been given in Ind AS. Separate financial statements, only cost method is allowed under accounting standards. In Ind AS, cost or fair value method, both are allowed. Method of accounting, equity method is not permitted in jointly controlled entities. In Ind AS 110, 111, the joint venture, you will need to have an equity method. Now, very quickly, I'll touch upon, though I have crossed 1.5 hours, but I will very quickly touch upon the related party disclosures. Please remember, when you are preparing your financial statements as per Ind AS, you need to go to the substance, not the rules. So identify related party relationships, identify the transactions, identify the outstanding balance, identify commitments, identify the circumstances in which the disclosures, and make sure that disclosure is to be made for all the above items. So in Ind AS, you need to be very, very clear, very sure, and key managerial persons are also, you need to be careful about. So in AS, we have related party disclosures. In Ind AS 24, we have related party. So the name seems similar, but the depth and the substance will explain that Ind AS would want you to have much detailed disclosures in comparison to what you do in accounting standards. So first, Ind AS, uh, they define the person, which is related to an entity which is preparing the financial statements. So what we call is a reporting entity. Then a close member of that person family is also, a related party if that person is a control, significant influence, or key AMP. So so apart from person, then you talk about entities. So related party entities, a similar kind of detailed guidance has been given in the Ind AS. If they are members of the same group, if an associate or joint ventures of the related entity, both entities have joint ventures or third party. So all those details have been given in the Ind AS. So you need to be very sure that, in case there is a joint venture, in case there is a parent subsidiary relationship, KMP relationship, or post-employment benefit. So there may be a control, there may be a joint control, there may be a significant influence. So non-executive directors are also deemed to be deemed as KMP. So you need to make disclosures of all of them. So basically this standard related party, this is not a recognition standard. This is a disclosure standard. So when you are, so there is guidance given on how to make a disclosure on the related party. So whether you charge a price or whether you have not charged a price, you need to make a, disclosure of a transaction which has been done with the related party. So a lot of issues come up when you are doing an audit of a small company, which is a group entity of a very large company. So you need to, in case there is a transaction, you need to make a disclosure because it is a related party. And similarly for close family relations who may be expected to influence or influenced by that person, there is a detail given: children, brother, sister, father, dependent, and all those kind of. And domestic partner word has also been used. We used to, talk that, okay, you have your spouse and your wife and husband as a related party. What about the person with whom you are having a living relationship? So all those things have been captured in Ind AS. So the definitions have been given in the standard about the compensation, about the control, about the KMPs, and then this standard goes on to explain what are the unrelated parties also. So that is very interesting to see that two entities, simply because they have a director in common, they do not become a related party. You need to test that according to the parameters which have been given in Ind AS 24. Then two venturers, because they share a joint control over a joint venture, it doesn't mean that they are a related party. So these exemptions have to be seen, it's not necessarily a related party. They may be related party, but not necessarily. Then there are disclosure requirements. Parent subsidiary relationships are there. Then management compensations are there. And then disclosures of compensation paid to the KMP, key managerial persons, short-term employee benefit, post-employment benefit, other long-term benefits, termination, share-based payments, all those disclosures have to be made. And there is a requirement of separate disclosure about nature of relationship, type of transaction, the amount of transaction, amount outstanding, and provisions in case you have done for doubtful debts, and then expenses recognized in the period in respect of doubtful debt. Then there are disclosure requirements. So following disclosures are required for the categories which were mentioned previously: the parent, the entity, the subsidiary, associates, JV, all related parties and their transactions. And then there are exemptions which have been given in the standards. So if we compare, Ind AS with the previous GAP, which is AS 18, the definition is use the term relative of an individual. Then here in Ind AS, it is much more based on substance. Then relatives, they cover the spouse, son, daughter, brother, sister, father, mother. but here it goes into more detail in Ind AS. So that means they cover children also, spouse, domestic partner, brother, sister, father, mother, children of parent, spouse, or domestic partner, dependents of that, all directions it goes. And Ind AS, as you can see, has gone into various directions. So KMP also it expands, and then related party in case of joint venture, then disclosure compensation. For compensation, it is not required in the previous gap, but in Ind AS it is required. Then government related party presently exempt the disclosure of such information. But now government related entities are also covered. So there are a lot of discussion happening around that. So this concludes the presentation. So what I did in this presentation was I started with showing you some slides or sharing with you some accounting stories in which the accounting frauds have happened and how those frauds, were reported by the, by there's a report by the to the nations, and how these frauds can happen and how the financial reporting fraud play a very important role. It is the most significant one. And then I went on to the framework, how the accounting standards are in India, how the Ind AS framework will work, what are the qualitative characteristics of those framework, and then what are the areas you need to be careful about when you're talking about Ind AS. And after that, we looked into various aspects of specific standards like consolidation and the related parties. So these are my thoughts. I will be very happy to answer in case there are any questions. So maybe I'll need some help. Somebody can read out the question and I can answer that. And in case there are no question, I'll ask, Joe sir to take the proceedings further, sir. Thank you very much.
I am checking any questions there or not in chat box. Or there is no questions. Participants, if you have any doubts on Ind AS or on the session what we have discussed by Prince Sir, you can kindly post your queries. Q&A session. Sir, I have one doubt regarding now this Ind AS is mandatory for certain companies. So if we do the voluntary, certain companies, whether they can do it voluntarily, then whether we have to prepare both, because they are not mandatory for companies, certain companies, but they want to make it in theirs because they have some foreign subsidiaries for a better comparison. So is it, so we have to have two accounts having in theirs as well as accounting standards, how we should.
So, Mr. Jose, there are companies which are foreign subsidiaries which are working in India as required by their head office, because their head office need to report to their regulators. And if they are preparing under IFRS, they would want their subsidiaries to prepare financials as per IFRS, because one of the requirement of consolidation is that the subsidiaries and the head office will need to have same policies, similar policies. So what they would ask the Indian entity is to prepare their financial statement as per IFRS. So Ind AS will not be applicable, but IFRS will be applicable because they need to report in IFRS. It's almost similar, IFRS and Ind AS, but as far as Indian regulators are concerned, they would need financial statement to be prepared as per AS, because it is not mandatory to put as per Ind AS. So in any case, company will be making two financial statement, one as per IFRS to be reported to their head office, and second as per AS for reporting to the regulators. Because regulator will always ask that you please, because there are I tell you, why this ICDS came into picture. This issue which you raised was discussed in a Chamber of Commerce. And there were people from CBDT and people from other regulator, MCA, they were all sitting there. They said, so one of the persons said, from the audience, that you are income tax people, income tax regulators. Your role is to see whether the person is paying tax correctly or not. You are not supposed to prepare the standards. That work, please leave it to the Institute of Chartered Accountants. They are supposed to prepare the standards. Why are you getting into ICDS, income disclosure and computation, income computation and disclosure standards? Why are you making standards? You are not supposed to make standards. You are supposed to regulate the tax law, whether the people are applying. So the lady who was answering those questions, she said that, at income tax department, we felt that there has to be uniformity. Everybody should be preparing the financial statements and should be paying tax. But when we looked at the subjectivity, somebody will be preparing as per Ind AS, somebody will be making as per AS, they will be making their policies in a different way. These people will be making, so we got confused. What should we do? So she said we identified certain areas, borrowing cost and all those kind of stuff. And we brought out our own standards so that the similarity should be there. Whether you are applying Ind AS or AS, if you are having a borrowing cost, you need to do accounting for the purpose of paying tax. So frankly speaking, this company will need to prepare 3 sets. One is for IFRS for head office. Second is as per AS for ROC. And third is applying ICDS for income tax people. So it's making it a little more complex. But, I think now the Institute has started this campaign of bringing all the standards on a similar platform, and a lot of changes have already been done. I think they are more or less coming very close when we will have one standards which are similar to IFRS or Ind AS, but very, very, so there will not be many differences. This is what I hear from the council members. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
It's a very interesting question, though. So thank you so much, Mr. Jose and Mr. Ranjit. Thank you so much, Mr. Roy. Seeing you, it always gives a very pleasant feeling meeting you. Thank you so much.
Sir, it was wonderful, one of the wonderful events that we could conduct last year, which was highly appreciated by the Accounting Standards Board also, particularly MPV sir. Very, very.
Sir is a very good friend, and he's always full of appreciation whenever we have an opportunity. So, so much.
It was really nice to see you once again. It's a wonderful presentation. So thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Over to President for Chairman for closing remarks. Any remarks?
Not much of closing remarks, but I should be really thankful to Praveen Kumarji for sparing his time in spite of, I should say more than the busy schedule, but for the lean crowd that we turn up that we saw today. But in spite of that, being patiently going into depth of the applicability pertaining to our audits, practical aspects of it. We are really thankful to you, Praveen Kumarji. And we also look forward to having you very soon in a physical mode.
Sure. Pleasure, sir. Thank you so much.
Back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Praveen sir, for that wonderful session. It was very interesting about how you presented that. Very interesting regarding that fraud framework, in the specific issues while auditing under Ind AS. So thank you very much. And on behalf of Ernakulam branch, I extend a sincere gratitude to you. What I feel you are part of us, a part of our branch, being the national head of ASA. ASN Associates having a branch in here, Cochin City, in our own jurisdiction. We feel you are part of us. So thank you very much, sir. And thank you all the participants for your support and joining us on this program. And I also thank the MC members, C. Roy Varghese, C. Salim, and all other MC members here for joining us. And thank you, our technical team, Raju and Tessie, for helping us on this program. And tomorrow we have a program starting at 11 a.m. 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Another CPE seminar on UE VAT and its evaluation over last 3 years. We have speaker CAJ Duseja joining us from Dubai. And also we have a chief guest, CA Sundar Nurani, the chairman of ICI chapter Dubai, joining us tomorrow 11 a.m. See you all tomorrow 11 a.m. Till then, bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.